The night my husband told me he was dying, I didn't think about money. I didn't think about the house. I didn't think about what would happen to me if everything went wrong. I only thought about one thing. I couldn't lose him. We had been married for almost 11 years, and during those 11 years, I had learned the little things about him that no one else noticed. I knew how he took his coffee in the morning. I knew that when he was nervous, he rubbed his thumb against the side of his index finger. I knew he hated hospitals, hated needles, and would rather suffer through a fever at home than let a doctor examine him. So when I noticed him becoming quieter, weaker, and distant, I didn't immediately think he was seriously ill. At first, I thought he was stressed. Work had been difficult for him for months. He came home later than usual, barely touched his dinner, and sometimes sat alone in the living room long after I had gone to bed. Whenever I asked him what was wrong, he would give me the same answer. "I'm fine. Just tired." I believed him. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You believe them. Then one Saturday morning, I found him sitting on the edge of our bed with his head buried in his hands. The curtains were still closed, and the room was unusually quiet. I walked toward him and placed my hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer. I sat beside him. "Talk to me." He finally looked at me. And I will never forget his face. He looked terrified. Not sad. Not angry. Terrified. "What happened?" I whispered. He swallowed hard. "The doctor found something." My heart immediately dropped. "What do you mean?" He stared at the floor. "I went to get some tests done last week." I frowned. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to scare you." That sentence alone frightened me more than anything else could have. I reached for his hand. "What did the doctor say?" For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "It's serious." I felt my chest tighten. "How serious?" He looked at me. "They think it could be cancer." The word seemed to stop the entire world around me. Cancer. I remember staring at him, waiting for him to say something else. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the doctors weren't sure. Maybe there was another explanation. But he just sat there, holding my hand. I started crying before I even realized it. He pulled me into his arms. And for the first time in 11 years, I felt my husband shaking against me. "I'm scared," he whispered. Those two words destroyed whatever strength I had left. My husband was scared. The man who had always acted like nothing could break him was suddenly afraid of dying. I held him tighter. "You're not going anywhere," I told him. He didn't answer. "You hear me? We're going to get through this." He finally nodded against my shoulder. But then came the part that changed everything. The doctors, according to him, had found an aggressive condition that required immediate treatment. The treatment was expensive, and insurance would cover only a portion of it. I asked him how much. He hesitated. Then he told me. It was more money than we had ever had sitting in our bank accounts. I stared at him. "How are we going to pay for this?" He looked away. "I don't know." That night, neither of us slept. I lay beside him staring at the ceiling, thinking about our life together. Our house had never been just a house. We had bought it 8 years earlier after saving for years. I still remembered the first time we walked through the front door. The walls were empty. The kitchen needed work. The backyard was overgrown. But we stood in the middle of that unfinished living room and imagined our future. We imagined children running through the hallway. We imagined family dinners. We imagined growing old there. Every room carried a memory. The small mark on the kitchen wall from the time we moved a table. The scratch on the staircase from when we brought our furniture inside. The little garden outside that I had spent years building. That house was the safest thing I had in the world. But the next morning, I made a decision. I would sell it. I didn't even hesitate. When I told my husband, he looked shocked. No. I shook my head. We have to. We can't sell the house. We can buy another one someday. What about you? I smiled through my tears. I'll be fine. He stared at me. You'd really do that? I reached for his hand. I'd sell everything I own if it meant keeping you alive. He pulled me toward him and held me tightly. And in that moment, I felt certain I was doing the right thing. I thought love meant standing beside someone when life became unbearable. I thought marriage meant sacrificing together. I thought if one person was drowning, the other person was supposed to reach into the water and pull them out. So I started making calls. The first time a real estate agent came to our house, I felt sick. She walked through the rooms, taking measurements and photographs while I stood silently behind her. Every photograph felt like someone was taking pieces of my life away. But whenever I felt myself hesitate, I remembered my husband sitting on the edge of our bed telling me he was dying. And the hesitation disappeared. Within weeks, we found a buyer. The offer was good. Very good. It was enough to cover the treatment he supposedly needed, with some money left over for us to start over afterward. I signed the papers with trembling hands. The day we handed over the keys, I stood in the empty living room for several minutes. There was no furniture anymore. No pictures on the walls. No curtains. Nothing. Just empty rooms and echoes. My husband stood beside me. You saved my life, he said softly. I looked at him. I would do it again. He kissed my forehead. And I believed him. I believed every word. We moved into a small temporary apartment while he prepared for treatment. For the first few days, I was focused entirely on him. I organized his appointments. I arranged his medications. I cooked meals he could tolerate. I sat beside him when he couldn't sleep. Every time he looked weak, I panicked. Every time he complained of pain, I searched for doctors and treatments. I even started keeping a notebook where I wrote down everything related to his condition. Dates. Appointments. Medications. Names of doctors. Questions I wanted to ask. I wanted to be prepared for everything. Because I believed my husband had been given a death sentence, and I was determined to fight it with him. There was only one thing I didn't know. The illness wasn't real. The hospital bills weren't what they seemed. And the man I had just sacrificed my home to save had never been fighting for his life at all. He had been planning something else. Something that would eventually make me realize that the house I sold to save my marriage had never been the real thing he wanted. He wanted the money. And he wanted me to believe that giving it to him was an act of love. At the time, however, I knew none of that. All I knew was that I had lost my home. And I believed I was saving the man I loved. That belief would become the most painful mistake of my life. For the first few days after we moved into the apartment, I told myself everything was going to be okay. We had lost the house, but we still had each other. At least, that was what I believed. My husband was supposed to begin his treatment soon, and I spent every waking hour trying to make his life easier. I arranged his appointments, prepared his meals, reminded him about medications, and kept track of every symptom he described. But something started changing. Not in his health. In him. At first, it was so subtle that I almost ignored it. He stopped talking to me about his condition. Whenever I asked what the doctor had said, he gave me short answers. They're still running tests. What kind of tests? Just routine ones. Did they change your medication? I don't remember. I tried not to push. I thought maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he was scared. Maybe talking about the illness made everything feel more real. So I gave him space. But the more time passed, the stranger things became. One morning, I woke up early and found him already dressed. He was standing near the window, staring at his phone. When he noticed me, he quickly locked the screen. "Who was that?" I asked. "No one." The answer came too quickly. I sat up. "Was it the doctor?" He shook his head. "Just work." I looked at the clock. It was 6:12 in the morning. "Your boss is calling you this early?" "He has been worried about me." I nodded, even though something about his explanation felt wrong. Then he walked into the bathroom and closed the door. I sat there staring at the phone he had left on the table. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to become that kind of wife. The suspicious wife. The wife who checked messages and searched pockets. I trusted him. At least I thought I did. A few days later, I drove him to what he told me was another medical appointment. I waited outside for nearly 2 hours. When he finally came out, he looked completely normal. Not tired. Not weak. Not even particularly stressed. He walked toward the car with a strange confidence. I lowered the window. "How did it go?" "Fine." "What did the doctor say?" "Nothing new." I stared at him. "Nothing?" He nodded. "They're still deciding what treatment to start." I frowned. "Didn't they say you needed treatment immediately?" He paused. "They're figuring things out." That answer stayed in my mind the entire drive home. That evening, I asked him for the name of the doctor. He looked annoyed. "Why?" "Because I want to know who is treating you." "You don't need to worry about that." I laughed nervously. "I'm your wife. Of course I need to worry about it." His expression changed. For a second, I saw anger. Then it disappeared. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm just exhausted." I immediately felt guilty. I reached for his hand. "I'm sorry too." That was how he always made me feel. Guilty for asking questions. Guilty for worrying. Guilty for wanting answers. I didn't realize it at the time, but slowly, he was teaching me to doubt my own instincts. Then came the first real crack. I was going through the financial paperwork related to his treatment when I noticed something strange. The amount we had set aside for medical expenses wasn't matching the amount he had told me. I checked the numbers again. Then again. There was money missing. Not a small amount. Thousands of dollars. I confronted him that evening. "Where did this money go?" He looked at the statement. "What money?" "This transfer." He stared at it for a few seconds. Then shrugged. "I paid some medical expenses." "Which ones?" "Hospital stuff." "What hospital?" He sighed. "Why are you interrogating me?" "I'm not interrogating you. I'm trying to understand where our money went." "Our money?" His voice suddenly became cold. "You sold the house for my treatment. Now you're questioning every dollar?" The words hit me hard. I immediately regretted asking. But something inside me had changed. Because he was right about one thing. I had sold the house for his treatment. So I had a right to know where the money was going. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened the notebook where I had been recording his appointments. Something didn't make sense. There were supposed to be several appointments by then. But the dates didn't match what he had told me. One appointment he claimed happened on a Tuesday was actually listed as a Sunday on his calendar. The hospital wasn't even open for that type of appointment on Sundays. I stared at the page for several minutes. Maybe I had written it down wrong. Maybe he had explained it differently. I wanted to believe that. I desperately wanted to believe that. Because the alternative was unbearable. Then, 2 days later, something happened that I couldn't explain away. His phone rang while he was in the shower. I wasn't planning to answer it. But the caller's name appeared on the screen. Daniel. I didn't know anyone named Daniel. The phone stopped ringing. Then a message appeared. I saw only the preview. Did you get the rest of the money? She still doesn't know? My heart stopped. I stared at the screen. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Then the bathroom door opened. My husband walked out. He saw the phone in my hand. His face changed immediately. Who is Daniel? He grabbed the phone. Why are you reading my messages? I wasn't. You answered it. I didn't answer anything. He walked away. I followed him. What did that message mean? Nothing. Why did he say I don't know? Because he doesn't understand the situation. What situation? He turned around. Can you stop? No. My voice surprised even me. No, I can't. He stared at me. You're making yourself sick over nothing. I felt tears building in my eyes. I sold our house. I know. I gave you everything we had. I know. So why can't you just tell me the truth? He didn't answer. And that silence frightened me more than any diagnosis could have. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to accuse him. I wasn't going to confront him again. I was going to find out the truth myself. I started with the hospital. I called the number on one of the documents he had left on the table. A receptionist answered. I gave her his name. She checked the records. Then she said something that made my stomach twist. I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't find a patient by that name. I thought I had heard her wrong. What? She repeated it. There was no record. No treatment. No appointment. Nothing. I hung up and sat completely still. Maybe he had used another hospital. Maybe the records were under a specialist's office. Maybe there was some innocent explanation. I wanted there to be. So I called another clinic. Then another. Nothing. Everywhere I looked, the story became weaker. And the more I searched, the more questions appeared. That evening, my husband came home smiling. He kissed my forehead. How are you? I looked at him. I'm fine. He smiled. Good. I watched him walk into the bedroom. For the first time since we got married, I looked at my husband and wondered whether I actually knew him. The man I had trusted with my entire life was standing only a few feet away from me. And yet suddenly, he felt like a stranger. I still didn't know the full truth. I didn't know where the money had gone. I didn't know who Daniel was. I didn't know why there were no hospital records. But one thing was becoming impossible to ignore. Something was terribly wrong. And before I could understand what was happening, I was going to discover a secret that would make selling my house feel like the smallest part of the betrayal. The next morning, I woke up with one thought repeating in my head. I needed the truth. Not the truth my husband wanted me to believe. Not the truth he had carefully explained to me. The real truth. For weeks, I had been telling myself that there had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe the hospital had made a mistake. Maybe his records were under a different name. Maybe the doctor worked through another clinic. Maybe the appointments had been moved without him telling me. I was searching for reasons because the truth was too painful to accept. But something inside me had already changed. I no longer trusted his words. That realization hurt more than I expected. This was the man whose hand I had held through 11 years of marriage. The man I had trusted with my home, my savings, my future, and every vulnerable part of myself. And now I was secretly investigating him. I waited until he left for what he called another medical appointment. He kissed me goodbye before walking out. "Don't worry too much," he said. I forced a smile. "I won't." The moment the door closed, I grabbed my purse. I drove directly to the hospital. I had been there before, but always with him. This time, I walked through the entrance alone. The lobby was crowded. People sat quietly in chairs, waiting for appointments. Nurses moved quickly through the halls. Families whispered to one another. For a moment, I almost turned around. I felt guilty. I felt like I was betraying my husband by questioning his illness. Then I remembered the message on his phone. "Did you get the rest of the money?" She still doesn't know? I walked to the reception desk. "I'm here about my husband," I said. The receptionist looked up. "Of course. What's his name?" I gave her his full name. She typed something into the computer. Then she stopped. She looked at the screen again. "Could you spell the last name?" I did. She searched again. Nothing. "Maybe his records are under his date of birth," I said. She asked for it. I gave it to her. She searched again. Still nothing. My heart started beating faster. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded. "I don't see a patient by that name." I swallowed. "He was diagnosed here." "Do you know the department?" "Oncology." She searched again. "No." I stared at her. "No?" "There is no record of an oncology patient with that name." I felt the blood drain from my face. Could the records be under another doctor? If he has been treated here, there should still be a record. I leaned closer. What if he had an appointment recently? She checked. No appointment either. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. The receptionist looked concerned. "Are you okay?" I nodded. Yes. But I wasn't. Not even close. I walked away from the desk and sat in the nearest chair. My hands were shaking. I opened my phone and looked at the medical documents my husband had given me. The hospital logo was printed clearly at the top. The doctor's name was there. The diagnosis was there. Everything looked official. So how could there be no record? Then I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. The doctor's name. I searched it online. The doctor existed. But he didn't work at that hospital. He worked at a private clinic across town. My heart began pounding. I drove there immediately. When I entered the clinic, I approached the receptionist. "I need to see Dr. Harrison regarding my husband." She asked for his name. I gave it. She searched the computer. This time, she paused. "Yes," she said. My stomach tightened. "So he is a patient here?" She nodded. "Was he diagnosed with cancer?" She looked at me carefully. "I'm sorry. I can't discuss a patient's medical information without authorization. I'm his wife. I understand, but I sold our house because of this." The words came out before I could stop them. The receptionist's expression changed. "I just need to know whether he is actually sick." She hesitated. Then she said something I will never forget. "I don't think you should be getting medical information from me." That wasn't an answer. But it wasn't a denial either. I asked if I could speak to the doctor. She told me he wasn't available. I left the clinic feeling more confused than before. Then, as I reached my car, I noticed a man walking out of a side entrance. It was Dr. Harrison. I recognized him from the photograph on the clinic's website. I ran toward him. "Doctor." He stopped. I introduced myself. "My husband is your patient." The doctor's expression immediately became serious. "What is his name?" I told him. He looked confused. Then he asked, "Are you sure?" "Yes." He stared at me for a long moment. "Has he shown you a diagnosis?" "Yes." "What diagnosis?" "Cancer." The doctor went silent. My heart started pounding. "Please," I said. "I need to know." He looked uncomfortable. "I can't discuss another person's medical information." "I'm not asking you to tell me everything. Just tell me one thing." He waited. "Is my husband dying?" The doctor looked directly into my eyes. "No." I felt the world tilt. "What?" I said no. I couldn't breathe. He continued carefully. "Your husband came to my clinic for a consultation several months ago. He had some routine tests done. And there was nothing indicating a life-threatening illness." I stared at him. But he showed me reports. The doctor frowned. "What reports?" I pulled my phone out and showed him photographs of the documents. He looked at them. His expression changed. "These aren't from my clinic. But your name is on them." "I know." He examined the page more closely. Then he shook his head. "This isn't my signature." I felt tears filling my eyes. "So he's not sick?" "Not according to the tests we performed." I covered my mouth. The doctor continued speaking, but I barely heard him. The room around me seemed to disappear. All I could think about was the house. The house we had built together. The house I had sold because my husband told me he was dying. The money. The documents. The lies. Every memory suddenly looked different. I drove home without knowing how I got there. When I entered the apartment, my husband wasn't home yet. I walked into the bedroom. I opened the drawer where he kept his documents. I searched through everything. Insurance papers. Bank statements. Old medical reports. Receipts. Then I found another envelope. It wasn't addressed to me. I opened it. Inside was a copy of a medical report. But this one was different. It was dated months earlier. The conclusion was clear. No evidence of cancer. No life-threatening disease. No urgent treatment recommended. I sat on the floor. For several minutes, I couldn't move. Then I started laughing. Not because anything was funny. Because sometimes the truth hurts so much that your mind doesn't know how else to react. He wasn't dying. He had never been dying. He had looked into my eyes and told me he was terrified of losing his life. And I had believed him. I had sold our home. I had destroyed our financial security. I had given him everything because I thought I was saving the man I loved. But the most painful question wasn't why he lied. It was this. What did he need all that money for? I began going through the bank statements again. This time, I wasn't looking for medical expenses. I was looking for where the money had actually gone. And that's when I found the first transfer. A large amount. Sent only 3 days after the house sale. The recipient's name was unfamiliar. I wrote it down. Then I found another transfer. And another. All going to different accounts. None of them were hospitals. None were doctors. None were pharmacies. My hands began shaking again. Then I noticed one recurring name. The same name appeared several times. A woman. I stared at it. I didn't recognize her. But suddenly, I remembered the message on my husband's phone. She still doesn't know. I had assumed she meant me. Now I wasn't so sure. I looked at the clock. My husband would be home soon. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what he might tell me. I was afraid of what I was about to discover. Because my husband hadn't simply lied about being sick. He had taken the home we built together, turned my love into money, and used that money for something he had been hiding from me. And whatever that secret was, it was big enough for him to pretend he was dying. I didn't confront my husband that night. That was the hardest decision I had ever made. Every part of me wanted to stand in front of him and scream. I wanted to throw the medical reports across the room. I wanted to ask him how he could look into my eyes, watch me sell our home, and still pretend he was dying. But I knew that if I confronted him too soon, he would lie. He had already lied about his illness. He could lie about anything. So instead, I sat quietly at the kitchen table and waited. When he finally came home, he looked completely normal. He walked through the door, placed his keys on the counter, and smiled at me. "Hey." I looked at him. "Hey." He kissed my forehead. "How was your day?" I almost laughed. My day? My entire life had changed in a single afternoon. But I simply said, "Fine." He opened the refrigerator. "Did you eat?" "No." "You should eat something." I watched him move around the kitchen like nothing had happened. Like he wasn't carrying a secret that had destroyed everything between us. Like he hadn't taken the money from our house. Like he hadn't convinced me he was dying. I realized something that night. The man sitting across from me wasn't the husband I thought I knew. He was a stranger wearing his face. After he went to bed, I waited until I was certain he was asleep. Then I opened the laptop. I pulled up the bank statements. The money from the house had been deposited into our joint account. Within days, large amounts began disappearing. The first transfer went to a company I didn't recognize. The second went to an individual account. The third was even larger. And then I found the name that kept appearing. A woman named Emily Carter. I stared at the name. I had never heard it before. At first, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she was a financial advisor. Maybe she worked for a medical organization. Maybe she was connected to the clinic. But when I searched the transaction details, none of those explanations made sense. The payments weren't labeled as medical expenses. They were personal transfers. Some were followed by descriptions like deposit, rent, and final payment. Rent. My hands went cold. Why would my husband be paying another woman's rent? I kept scrolling. Then I found a payment for a car. Another for furniture. Another for an apartment. I sat completely still. The money from our house wasn't paying for treatment. It was paying for someone else's life. I opened another account. There were photographs. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. My husband had another phone. I found pictures of him with Emily. Not one or two. Dozens. They were smiling. They were sitting in restaurants. They were standing in front of an apartment. They looked happy. There were pictures from birthdays. Pictures from vacations. Pictures taken during weekends when I thought my husband was working. One photograph made me stop breathing. It was taken in front of a house. A beautiful house. And standing beside him was Emily. Her hand was resting on his chest. On the other side of her stood a little boy. I zoomed in. The boy looked about 7 years old. My husband had his arm around him. I stared at the screen. Then I noticed the caption. Our little family. I felt something inside me break. Another family. My husband had another family. For years, I had thought the late nights were work. The unexplained trips were business. The strange phone calls were nothing. The times he disappeared for entire weekends had always come with some excuse. I had believed every single one. Meanwhile, somewhere else, he was living his second life. I kept searching. The deeper I went, the worse it became. Emily wasn't someone he had recently met. There were photographs dating back years. Years. He had been maintaining this secret while coming home to me every night. While sitting at our dinner table. While sleeping beside me. While telling me he loved me. And now I understood the medical lie. He hadn't invented the illness because he needed money for treatment. He invented it because he needed a reason to get access to the money without making me suspicious. He knew I would never willingly hand over our savings to support another woman. But if he told me he was dying? He knew exactly what I would do. He knew I would sacrifice everything. The house. The savings. My future. He knew because he had spent 11 years studying me. He knew how deeply I loved him. And he used that love against me. I found one final folder. Inside were documents related to the house. My house. The house I had sold. There was an email from a real estate attorney. The message was dated before he ever told me he was sick. I read it twice. Then a third time. The email discussed the possibility of selling our property and transferring the proceeds. But the date made no sense. He had been planning this before his diagnosis. Before the hospital story. Before I knew anything was wrong. I scrolled further. There were messages between him and Emily. One message from my husband said, "She'll never agree to sell unless she thinks it's for something serious." Emily replied, "Then make her believe it's life or death." I stopped reading. I couldn't breathe. I covered my mouth with both hands. There it was. The truth. The illness wasn't a desperate lie created at the last minute. It was a plan. A calculated plan. They had discussed me. They had discussed my house. They had discussed my emotions. And they had decided exactly how to manipulate me. I remembered the morning my husband sat on the edge of the bed. His trembling hands. His frightened expression. The way he whispered, "I'm scared." I had held him. I had promised him I wouldn't let him die. All of it had been an act. And I had been the only person in the room who didn't know it was a performance. I wanted to cry. But strangely, I couldn't. The tears simply wouldn't come. I felt numb. Then I heard the bedroom door open. My husband appeared in the hallway. "What are you doing?" I quickly closed the laptop. "Nothing." He looked at me suspiciously. "Why are you awake?" I couldn't sleep. He walked toward me. "You've been acting strange lately." I looked at him. "Have I?" "Yes." He sat beside me. "You know you can talk to me." The irony almost destroyed me. I stared at the man who had lied to me about having cancer. The man who had another woman. Another home. Another family. And now he was telling me I could talk to him. I smiled faintly. "I know." He reached for my hand. I let him take it. His fingers wrapped around mine. For 11 years, that touch had made me feel safe. That night, it made my skin crawl. "Everything will be okay," he said. I looked into his eyes. And for the first time, I didn't believe a single word coming out of his mouth. He went back to bed. I stayed at the table until sunrise. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I planned. Because I finally understood something. If I confronted him now, he would deny everything. He would delete the messages. He would hide the accounts. He would tell Emily. And whatever evidence remained would disappear. So I decided to do something he would never expect. I would pretend I still believed him. I would let him think his plan had worked. I would smile. I would act worried about his health. I would ask about his treatment. I would continue playing the role of the loving wife he had created in his mind. But behind that smile, I would collect everything. Every bank statement. Every photograph. Every message. Every transaction. Every piece of evidence. Because he had spent months preparing to destroy my life. He just didn't realize that his biggest mistake had been underestimating the woman he had betrayed. He thought he had taken my house. He thought he had taken my money. He thought he had taken away my security. But there was one thing he hadn't taken. My ability to discover the truth. And now that I knew the truth, I wasn't interested in getting my old life back. I wanted him to understand exactly what it felt like when the person you trusted most turned out to be the person who had been destroying you all along. The next morning, when he woke up, I smiled at him. "Good morning." He smiled back. "Good morning." Then he asked the question that would later haunt him. "Do you still believe me?" I looked directly into his eyes. "Yes," I said softly. And for the first time in our marriage, I lied to him too. For the next 3 weeks, I became the wife my husband thought he still had. I made his coffee in the morning. I asked about his appointments. I reminded him to rest. I even asked whether he was feeling better. Every time he looked at me, I smiled. And every time I smiled, a small part of me wondered how I had ever loved someone capable of doing this. But I didn't let my emotions control me. I collected everything. I printed every bank statement. I saved every message. I photographed every document. I copied every transaction connected to the money from the house. I even contacted the real estate attorney and requested copies of every document related to the sale. Slowly, the picture became complete. My husband had planned everything months before he ever told me he was sick. He had already been communicating with Emily. He had already been arranging a place for them. He had already decided how much money he needed. The fake illness had simply been the easiest way to get it. But there was one thing I still didn't know. What would happen when he realized I knew? I wanted to find out. So one Friday evening, I asked him to sit with me. "I need to talk to you." He looked nervous. "About what?" I placed 2 cups of coffee on the table. "About your treatment." His face changed slightly. "What about it?" "I've been thinking." He reached for his coffee. "About what?" "I think we should cancel everything." He frowned. "Cancel what?" "The treatment." He stared at me. "Why?" "Because I don't think you need it." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. His hand stopped halfway to the cup. "What are you talking about?" I smiled. "I know you're not sick." His face went completely blank. For several seconds, he didn't move. Then he laughed. A nervous, forced laugh. "Where did you get that idea?" I reached into my bag. "I spoke to your doctor." His smile disappeared. "You what?" "I went to the clinic." "You had no right." I placed the medical report on the table. "You're right." "Maybe I didn't." Then I placed another document beside it. "And maybe I had no right to check our bank account." His eyes moved toward the papers. Then I placed the photographs down. His face changed again. "Emily. The child. The house. The messages. Everything." He stared at the table. I watched him carefully. For the first time since I had known him, he looked genuinely afraid. Not the fake fear from the morning he told me he was dying. This was real. He knew he had been caught. "Who gave you these?" I almost smiled. "That's your first question?" He said nothing. "You don't want to know why I'm asking?" He looked at me. "You've been following me?" "No." "Then how?" "You left evidence everywhere." His eyes moved back to the photographs. I could see him calculating. trying to find a way out. Trying to build another lie. Finally, he whispered, "It's not what you think." I laughed. That sentence. Those 5 words. The favorite sentence of every liar who has nowhere left to hide. Then tell me what it is. He looked down. Emily and I. He stopped. I waited. Go on. We were friends. Friends don't buy houses together. He closed his eyes. She needed help. She needed help? Yes. And the car? He said nothing. The apartment? Silence. The money from our house? He looked at me. I was going to pay it back. That sentence hurt more than everything else. Not because I believed him. Because he actually expected me to. You were going to pay me back? Yes. With what? He didn't answer. I leaned forward. You weren't sick. I know. The words came quietly. My heart stopped. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. I know, he repeated. I stared at him. You knew I believed you were dying. I didn't want to hurt you. I felt something inside me snap. You didn't want to hurt me? My voice trembled. You made me sell our home. I needed the money. You watched me cry. I know. You watched me pack our entire life into boxes. I know. You watched me give you everything I had. He lowered his head. I know. I stood up. No. You don't know. He looked at me. You have no idea what you did. I pointed toward the documents. You didn't just steal money from me. You stole my ability to trust my own memories. He started crying. Real tears. But I didn't feel sorry for him. Not anymore. He reached for my hand. Please. I pulled away. I loved you. I know. I would have stayed with you through cancer. I know. I would have taken care of you. I know. I would have watched my entire life disappear if it meant keeping you alive. He covered his face. And for a moment, I almost felt the old version of myself returning. The woman who wanted to comfort him. The woman who believed marriage meant forgiveness. But then I remembered the message. She'll never agree unless she thinks it's life or death. That sentence destroyed the last piece of love I had been holding on to. I took out my phone. I've already spoken to an attorney. His head snapped up. What? I've provided copies of everything. His face went pale. You wouldn't. I already did. He stood up. Please don't do this. You did this. I made a mistake. This wasn't a mistake. I looked him directly in the eyes. It was a plan. He started crying harder. He told me he was sorry. He told me he loved me. He told me Emily didn't matter. He told me the money could be returned. He promised to end everything. He promised he would change. But none of it mattered anymore. Because I finally understood something. An apology doesn't erase a plan. It doesn't erase the lies. It doesn't rebuild a home. And it certainly doesn't restore 11 years of trust. I left that apartment that night with one suitcase. I didn't have the house anymore. I didn't have the marriage I thought I had. I didn't even have the future I had spent years imagining. But I had the truth. And strangely, the truth felt lighter than the lie. Months later, the legal process was still unfolding. Some of the money was recovered. Not all of it. But enough for me to start again. I rented a small place of my own. The first night there, I sat beside the window and looked around. The apartment was tiny. The walls were plain. There were no memories hanging from them. No photographs. No furniture we had chosen together. No garden outside. But for the first time in months, I felt safe. I realized something that night. My husband had taken my house. But he hadn't taken my future. He had taken my money. But he hadn't taken my ability to rebuild. He had broken my trust. But he hadn't broken me. A year later, I heard that he and Emily were no longer together. Apparently, once the money stopped coming, their perfect little life didn't look so perfect anymore. I never asked for details. I didn't need them. Karma didn't need my help. My only revenge was moving forward. One evening, I drove past the neighborhood where our old house had been. I stopped outside for a moment. The house looked different. A different family lived there now. There were children's bicycles near the garage. A dog was running across the yard. Someone had planted flowers where my garden used to be. For a moment, I felt sad. Then I smiled. That house had once represented everything I thought I needed to be happy. But now I understood. A home isn't made of walls. A marriage isn't made of promises. And love isn't proven by how much of yourself you're willing to destroy for someone else. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is knowing when to stop sacrificing yourself for someone who would never sacrifice anything for you. I drove away that evening without looking back. I had lost the house. I had lost the husband. I had lost 11 years of believing I knew someone who never truly existed. But I had found myself. And that was worth more than everything he had taken. Because the day I sold my house to save my husband's life, I thought I was saying goodbye to the life I had built. I was wrong. I was saying goodbye to the woman who thought love meant losing herself. And when I finally drove away from that old house, I wasn't leaving my life behind. I was finally beginning it.